Staff Sergeant John Miller stood at attention as the alien delegation walked past him. Their many legs clicked against the metal floor of the U.S. Intrepid's main hangar bay. Miller had seen pictures of the Xelarians before, but nothing prepared him for how tall they actually were. The insect-like aliens towered over even the tallest humans by at least 2 feet. At ease, Captain Frank Davis said once the aliens had moved further into the hangar. Miller relaxed his stance slightly but kept his eyes forward. After 15 years as a Marine, he'd seen a lot, but first contact with an alien species was something else entirely. Especially when that contact meant humans would now serve alongside these aliens in something called the Galactic Coalition Forces. "What do you think, Miller?" asked Lieutenant Amy Patel as she moved to stand beside him. Miller considered his words carefully. "They're bigger than I expected, ma'am." Lieutenant Patel nodded. "And we're smaller than they expected. They keep calling us Deathworlders. Apparently, our gravity, atmosphere, and wildlife should have killed us off ages ago." Miller fought back a smile. Humans had always been too stubborn to die when they were supposed to. 3 days later, Miller and 5 other Marines boarded a Xelarian transport ship. They were the first humans selected to train with the alien coalition forces. Miller watched Earth grow smaller through a viewport until it was just another dot in the blackness of space. The Xelarian ship was cold, and the air felt too thin. Miller's squad adjusted as best they could. Private Ben Costa complained about the food. Protein paste with no flavor. Corporal Lisa Garcia couldn't get used to the sleeping pods that kept them standing upright. But everyone knew the importance of their mission. They were representing all of humanity. Commander Krizat, the Xelarian officer in charge of their training, didn't make things easy. The insectoid alien's face was hard to read, with its compound eyes and clicking mandibles, but Miller could sense the skepticism radiating from him. "Your species has survived on a Class 12 death world," Krizat said during their first briefing. His words were translated through a small device attached to his exoskeleton. "We are curious to see how your survival traits will translate to combat situations." The training facility orbited a gas giant in a system Miller couldn't pronounce. Inside, the gravity was set slightly higher than Earth normal, which didn't bother the humans, but made the Xelarians move with even more deliberate care than usual. Miller's squad trained alongside a Xelarian unit led by Sergeant Tivac, a younger alien with blue-tinged carapace. Tivac watched Miller closely during physical training, mandibles twitching when the humans performed their standard workout routines. "You deliberately damage your muscle fibers," Tivac asked Miller after watching the squad exercise. "That's how we get stronger," Miller explained. "Tear down, rebuild better." Tivac's antennae quivered. "Your species intentionally harms itself to improve." Fascinating and disturbing. The combat simulations revealed more differences. The Xelarians moved with precise, calculated efficiency. They never wasted energy, never took unnecessary risks. They planned each move carefully. Humans, by contrast, improvised. They took chances. They kept going even when exhausted. After a particularly grueling simulation, Miller collapsed next to Tivac in the rest area. "Your endurance is impressive, human," Tivac said. "Our medical officer is concerned about your elevated heart rate and stress hormones, but you keep functioning." Miller shrugged. "That's just being a Marine. On my world, pushing oneself to such limits would be considered dangerous and unnecessary." Miller took a long drink of water. "On our world, we call it Tuesday." That earned him a sound that might have been a Xelarian laugh. As the first week of training ended, Miller sensed the alien's perspective shifting. The sidelong glances became longer looks of consideration. The whispered conversations when humans entered a room took on a different tone. They weren't just strange creatures from a deadly planet anymore. They were potential allies, unpredictable, resilient, and surprisingly adaptable. And soon, they would face their first real mission together. The second week of training proved harder than the first. Commander Krezat introduced complex team exercises that mixed humans and Solarians together. Miller found himself constantly frustrated by the aliens' careful approach to every situation. "We could have finished this course 20 minutes ago," Miller muttered to Garcia as they waited for the Excelarians to triple-check their equipment before crossing a simulated danger zone. Garcia nodded. "They planned for every possible outcome. We just run through and deal with problems as they come." Their different styles caused tension during a rescue simulation. A training dummy representing an injured soldier lay in the middle of a field with various obstacles and simulated threats. The Excelarian team leader, a veteran named Zikur, spent 15 minutes creating a detailed plan. Miller watched the clock ticking down. In a real situation, the wounded soldier would have pulled out by now. "With respect," Miller said, interrupting Zikur's explanation, "I think we should move now." Zikur's antennae stiffened. "The plan is not complete. There are 14 more variables to consider." "And our guy is dying while we talk," Miller said. Without waiting for permission, he sprinted into the field. The simulation came alive. Harmless but startling explosions erupted around him. Holographic enemies appeared, firing training lasers that would register as hits on his combat suit. Miller ducked, rolled, and zigzagged across the field. He reached the dummy, hoisted it over his shoulder, and began the return journey. The Excelarians stood frozen, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Miller now recognized as shock. Then, to everyone's surprise, T-Vac rushed forward to provide cover fire for Miller. Together, they made it back to the starting point. Commander Krezat was furious. "You violated direct orders from your team leader." "The mission was to save the wounded," Miller replied, breathing hard. "In the time it would have taken to finish the plan, the soldier would have died. That was not your decision to make." Krezat's translator couldn't hide the anger in his voice. Later in the meal hall, T-Vac sat across from Miller. The other Excelarians kept their distance. "You broke protocol," T-Vac said, "but your method was effective." Miller pushed his food around the plate. The bland pace never got more appealing. "Sometimes you have to make quick decisions in combat. Not everything can be planned. This is why your kind survived on your death world," T-Vac said. "Quick adaptability. Our species evolved differently. We survived through careful planning and risk avoidance." Their conversation was interrupted when Krezat entered with Captain Davis. The human captain had arrived on a transport ship that morning. "Attention," Davis called, and all the humans stood immediately. Krezat made a clicking sound, and the Excelarians rose too. "We're accelerating your joint training," Davis announced. "The situation in Nebula 429 has deteriorated. The Dravari Collective has seized a coalition mining facility. Your teams will be deployed in 48 hours. A nervous buzz filled the room. The Dravari were a real threat, not a training exercise. That evening, Miller found T-Vac in the observation deck, looking out at the gas giant's swirling clouds. "Are you ready for real combat?" Miller asked. T-Vac's compound eyes reflected the planet's colors. "I have trained for 7.3 Earth years for this moment." "But are you ready?" Miller pressed. T-Vac turned to face him. "No, I do not think anyone truly is. How do you humans prepare mentally for battle?" Miller thought about his previous deployments on Earth. "We accept that we can't control everything. We trust our training and our team. I will try to be more adaptable," T-Vac said. "If we are to succeed against the Dravari, we must combine our strengths." Miller nodded. "Your planning, our improvisation." As they stood looking at the stars, Miller felt the weight of what was coming. Soon, these training exercises would be replaced by real danger. The differences between humans and Solarians wouldn't just be interesting cultural notes. They could mean life or death. Neither species said it aloud, but both wondered the same thing. When the firing started for real, would their differences tear them apart or make them stronger together? The Coalition transport ship hummed as it cut through space toward Nebula 429. Miller checked his gear for the third time, a habit from years of combat drops. Around him, human marines did the same. Across the loading bay, the Xelarians stood in perfect formation, barely moving. 10 minutes to drop zone, announced the ship's eye. Captain Davis walked through the bay, stopping to speak with both human and alien troops. When he reached Miller, he lowered his voice. Command wants this operation to showcase interspecies cooperation. Keep your squad in line, Miller. Yes, sir, Miller replied. But if things go sideways, then adapt, Davis said. But try to bring the bugs along with you when you do. Miller nodded and moved to where his assigned team waited. He had been placed in charge of 3 humans: Corporal Lisa Garcia, Private First Class Kevin Jones, and Combat Medic Samantha Wright. 4 Xelarians completed the team, led by Tevak. Remember the mission? Tevak clicked to his soldiers. Secure the facility. Hold position until reinforcements arrive. The mining facility orbited a small moon, harvesting rare minerals needed for starship engines. Intelligence suggested the small Draveri force had captured it 3 days ago. The ship shuddered as it decelerated. The bay doors opened to reveal their drop zone, a landing pad attached to the facility's outer ring. Move out, Commander Krezad ordered. The teams filed out in perfect order. Miller's group was third in the formation. As they floated across to the landing pad in zero gravity, Miller noticed how gracefully the Xelarians moved compared to the humans. Once inside, artificial gravity returned. Miller felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders as his magnetic boots clicked to the floor. Secure the perimeter, Tevak ordered. The Xelarians began a methodical sweep, checking every corner and scanning for traps. Miller caught Garcia's eye and saw his own impatience reflected there. At this rate, we'll reach the control room next week, Jones whispered. Follow protocol, Miller reminded him, though he shared the sentiment. 3 hours later, they had cleared only the outer sections of the facility. No sign of the Draveri yet. Tevak insisted on scanning each room multiple times before declaring it safe. Scans show life signs in the central hub, reported a Xelarian technician. Heat signatures matched Draveri biology. Tevak began outlining an approach plan that would take another 2 hours. Miller listened, growing more frustrated by the minute. With respect, Miller said, the longer we take, the more time they have to prepare or destroy important equipment. We cannot rush into a potential ambush, Tevak replied. Before Miller could argue further, his comm unit buzzed. Captain Davis's voice came through. All teams, we've detected a Draveri ship approaching. Estimated arrival: 30 minutes. Secure that control room now. Tevak's antennae twitched anxiously. We must accelerate our plan. Follow me, Miller said. I'll show you how humans clear a room. To his surprise, Tevak agreed. The mixed team moved faster now, with Miller and Garcia taking point. They encountered their first resistance outside the processing section. 2 Draveri guards. The aliens were reptilian with gray scales and 4 arms, each holding a weapon. Miller and Tevak fired simultaneously, dropping the guards before they could sound an alarm. Nice shot, Miller said. Tevak's mandibles clicked. Your timing was acceptable. They reached the entrance to the central hub. According to scans, at least 8 Draveri waited inside. Tevak began to suggest a cautious approach, but Miller could see the time ticking away. We don't have time for careful, Miller said. Jones, flash grenade. Jones handed him the device. Miller looked at Tevak. 3 seconds after this goes in, we all move. Your precision, our speed. Got it. Tevak hesitated, then nodded. Understood. Miller threw the grenade through the doorway. The flash and bang echoed through the corridor. Then, as one unit, the humans and Xelarians charged in. For the first time since training began, they moved as a single team, humans bringing their aggressive speed, Xelarians adding their precise aim and tactical awareness. The Draveri, stunned by the grenade, barely had time to react before the room was secured. Control room taken, Miller reported into his comm. 8 enemies neutralized. No casualties on our side. Captain Davis's voice came back. Good work. Now dig in. That Draveri ship is still coming, and it's bigger than we thought. Miller helped the Xelarians set up defensive positions around the control room. They barricaded doors and established firing lanes covering all possible entry points. The Draveri ship would arrive soon, and everyone knew the 8 enemies they'd encountered were just the advance team. How many do you think are on that ship? Garcia asked as she checked her weapon. Miller shrugged. Too many. We just need to hold until reinforcements arrive. Tivac approached them, his exoskeleton gleaming under the facility's lights. The Coalition fleet is still 3 hours away. We must defend this position until then. Medic Wright set up a small treatment area in the corner of the control room. Jones worked with 2 Xelarians to hack into the facility systems, hoping to use the automated defenses against the incoming Draveri. I got it, Jones called suddenly. I can see their ship on the sensors. It's big, troop carrier class, could be carrying 40 or 50 soldiers. Miller felt a cold weight in his stomach. 10 defenders against 50 attackers were not good odds, even with the Xelarians' precision and the humans' adaptability. We should move to a more defensible position, Tivac suggested. The processing center has fewer entry points. Miller nodded. Good thinking. Jones, can you access the facility's layout? Jones pulled up a holographic map. Miller and Tivac studied it together. Here, Miller pointed to a bottleneck in the corridor system. If we set up in the processing center, we can funnel them through this corridor. Tivac's mandibles clicked in agreement, a sound tactical decision. They moved quickly to the new position. The processing center had thick walls and heavy machinery that provided excellent cover. Miller directed Garcia to set explosive charges at key points in the approach corridor. Remote detonation, he told her. When we get a cluster of them in the kill zone. A loud bang shook the station. The Draveri ship had docked. They're coming, Wright whispered. Miller looked at the human and alien faces around him. Fear looked the same on any species, he realized. Stay calm, he said. Remember your training. Tivac added, precision and courage will see us through. The first wave came 30 minutes later. They heard the Draveri before they saw them. Heavy footsteps and the distinctive hissing language. Wait for my signal, Miller told Garcia, who held the detonator. Through the security cameras, they watched the Draveri approach. At least 15 of them moving in formation down the corridor. Now, Miller said when they reached the kill zone. Garcia pressed the detonator. The explosion rocked the station. When the dust settled, the corridor was filled with debris and Draveri bodies. That won't stop them for long, Miller said. They'll find another way around. Tivac checked the station schematics. There are maintenance tunnels they could use. We should. Another explosion cut him off, much closer this time. The lights flickered. They're blasting through the east wall, Jones shouted. Miller and Tivac rushed to the east side of the processing center. The wall there was beginning to glow red from cutting tools on the other side. Everyone take cover, Miller ordered. The wall exploded inward, sending metal shrapnel flying across the room. 3 Xelarians were hit, though their tough exoskeletons protected them from serious injury. Draveri soldiers poured through the breach, firing energy weapons that left scorch marks on the walls. Miller and his team returned fire, dropping several enemies, but more kept coming. Miller saw movement from above. More Draveri were cutting through the ceiling. Watch the ceiling, he yelled. Too late. A section of ceiling collapsed, bringing down a shower of debris and more enemy soldiers. One landed directly behind Tivac, who didn't see the threat. Miller didn't think. He lunged forward, tackling Tivac out of the way as the Draveri fired. They crashed into a processing machine as the shot missed them. But Miller's relief was short-lived. A massive piece of ceiling debris broke loose, falling directly toward them. Miller pushed TVAC clear with all his strength. The massive metal beam crashed down. Miller tried to roll away, but he wasn't fast enough. A searing pain shot through his left arm as the beam pinned him to the floor. The battle continued around him in flashes of light and sound that seemed distant now. Miller looked down and saw his left arm crushed below the elbow, blood pooling beneath him. TVAC's face appeared above him, mandibles clicking in distress. "Don't move, human," the alien said. "You are severely injured." Through the haze of pain, Miller could hear the battle intensifying. More Draveri were coming. They couldn't afford to lose a fighter. "Help me up," Miller gasped. "We're not done yet." TVAC stared at Miller in shock. The human's left arm was clearly crushed, blood soaking the floor beneath him. By all logic, the Marine should be unconscious, or at least incapacitated from pain and blood loss. "You cannot continue fighting," TVAC insisted. "You require immediate medical attention." Miller gritted his teeth. "First, get this beam off me." TVAC hesitated, then called over another Xilarian. Together, they lifted the heavy metal beam. Miller bit back a scream as the pressure released from his ruined arm. The pain nearly made him black out. But he didn't. Instead, Miller reached for his belt with his good hand and pulled out a medical kit. Every human Marine carried one. "Cover me for 30 seconds, Miller told TVAC. The Xilarian reluctantly returned to the fight, glancing back frequently at the injured human. Miller worked quickly despite the pain clouding his thoughts. He pulled out a tourniquet and, using his teeth and right hand, managed to wrap it around his arm above the crush injury. He twisted the tightening rod until the blood flow slowed to a trickle. Next came the auto-injector of painkillers. Miller jabbed it into his thigh, feeling the cold rush of drugs enter his system. The edge of the pain dulled slightly, not gone, but manageable. He looked at what remained of his left arm. The limb below the elbow was completely crushed, barely recognizable as human. Miller knew it couldn't be saved. "Right." He called to the medic, who was treating an injured Xilarian. She turned and her eyes widened at the sight of his arm. "Oh God, Miller." "No time," he said. "I need a quick seal on this so I can get back in the fight." Wright rushed over, professional training overriding her shock. "You should be evacuated." "Not happening," Miller cut her off. "Just do what you can. Fast." Around them, the battle continued. Jones and Garcia were holding the main entrance while TVAC and his remaining soldiers defended the breach in the wall. More Draveri kept coming. Wright worked with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound as best she could and applying a spray bandage that expanded into a hard foam covering. "This is temporary," she warned. "You're going to lose more of that arm when we get back to a proper medical facility." Miller nodded. "As long as it holds for now." From across the room, TVAC was watching through his tactical visor. The Xilarian couldn't believe what he was seeing. The human had applied emergency medical care to himself after sustaining an injury that would have incapacitated any Xilarian. Now Miller was standing up, testing his balance, and reaching for his weapon. TVAC sent the video feed to the other Xilarians. Their reactions came immediately, clicks and chirps of disbelief in his earpiece. "Deathworlder indeed," one commented. Miller staggered over to TVAC's position, his face pale but determined. "What's our status?" "You should rest," TVAC said. Miller shook his head. "Can't afford to." "How many Draveri left?" TVAC realized arguing was pointless. "Sensors show approximately 25 still on board the station. We have eliminated at least 20. And our team. 3 Xilarians have minor injuries. The human Jones has a burn on his shoulder. You are the only serious casualty." Miller nodded, then winced as a wave of pain broke through the medication. "We need to change tactics. They'll overwhelm us with numbers eventually." TVAC studied the human with new respect. "What do you suggest?" "We stop defending and start hunting," Miller said. "Small teams, hit and run. Use the station against them. In Tivak's earpiece, Commander Krizat's voice spoke. He is seriously injured. How is he still functioning tactically? Tivak had no answer. He had studied human physiology, but had never truly understood what it meant to evolve on a death world, until this moment. I will follow your plan, Tivak told Miller. You have proven your tactical abilities. Miller managed a weak smile. And after we survive this, I can finally get one of those cool robot arms they make back on Earth. Always wanted to try one. Tivak's translator struggled with the concept, but he understood the sentiment. Humor in the face of severe injury, another human trait that baffled him. As they prepared to split into strike teams, Miller caught Tivak staring at his bandaged arm. What? Miller asked. I am trying to understand, Tivak said quietly. Why do you continue? Miller's answer was simple. Because the job's not done. Miller's plan worked better than anyone expected. They divided into 3 teams. Miller with Tivak, Garcia with 2 Zilarians, and Jones with Wright and the remaining alien soldier. Each team moved through different parts of the station, striking quickly and disappearing into maintenance tunnels before the Draveri could respond. Miller fought through waves of pain and dizziness. The painkillers helped, but blood loss was taking its toll. Still, he pressed on, using his pistol with his right hand, while Tivak covered his vulnerable left side. 2 more at the junction ahead, Tivak whispered, reading his scanner. Miller nodded. I'll draw their fire. You flank left. Tivak started to object, concerned about Miller's condition, but the human was already moving. Miller fired 2 shots down the corridor, deliberately missing the Draveri, but forcing them to take cover. Tivak used the distraction to circle around and take both enemies down with precision shots. Your tactic was effective, Tivak admitted when they regrouped, though extremely risky. Miller leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. The foam bandage on his arm was holding, but he felt weaker by the minute. Sometimes risk is necessary. Tivak tilted his head. Your species embraces risk in a way mine never could. Their conversation was interrupted by Garcia's voice over the comm. We've reached the Draveri ship's docking port. Setting charges now. Good, Miller replied. That'll cut off their retreat. In another part of the station, Jones and his team were sabotaging life support to sections occupied by the Draveri, forcing them to move toward prepared ambush points. Miller checked the time. The coalition reinforcements were still an hour away. He wasn't sure if he could last that long, but he wouldn't stop trying. Miller, your vital signs are concerning, Wright said over the comm. Her medical sensors were monitoring everyone's condition. Your blood pressure is dropping. I'm fine, Miller insisted, though the edges of his vision were growing dark. Tivak watched the human with growing concern. Despite Miller's words, the Xilarian could see he was deteriorating. Yet he kept fighting, kept moving, kept thinking tactically. It defied Tivak's understanding of biology. An explosion rocked the station, Garcia's team blowing the docking port. Almost immediately, the Draveri tactics changed. Knowing they were trapped, they became more aggressive, more desperate. All teams, fall back to the processing center, Miller ordered. We'll make our stand there. As Miller and Tivak moved through the corridors, an alarm sounded. Jones's voice came through the comm, urgent and stressed. Miller, they've set charges on the station's reactor. If it blows, the whole place goes. Miller cursed. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. I don't know how to disarm their tech. Miller looked at Tivak. Change of plans. We need to reach the reactor. Tivak's antennae twitched anxiously. There are at least 8 Draveri between us and the reactor section. Then we fight through them, Miller said simply. They ran into the first Draveri patrol at the next intersection. The firefight was brief but intense. Miller took down 2 enemies, but a shot grazed his right shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Tivak finished the remaining Draveri. Are you injured further? Tivak asked urgently. Miller pushed himself up, ignoring the fresh pain. Just a scratch. Keep moving. 3 more Draveri blocked their path to the reactor level. This time, Tivac took the lead, using a flash grenade to blind the enemies before Miller shot them. They finally reached the reactor control room, with just over 4 minutes remaining on the Draveri explosive device. 3 Draveri technicians turned in surprise as they burst in. Tivac eliminated 2 with rapid fire, while Miller tackled the third, his remaining arm locked around the alien's throat until it stopped struggling. "Cover the door," Miller told Tivac as he examined the bomb attached to the reactor controls. The device was unlike anything Miller had seen before, alien technology with no clear deactivation method. Miller's comm crackled. "This is Captain Davis. Reinforcements have arrived early. What's your status?" "We've got a bomb on the reactor," Miller replied, sweat dripping down his face despite the cold air. 4 minutes to detonation. "Evacuation ships are inbound," Davis said. "Get to the emergency airlocks on level 3. Miller looked at the reactor, then at the bomb. "Negative, Captain. Not enough time to evacuate everyone. We need to disarm this thing." As if to emphasize the urgency, the station shook with another explosion, the reinforcements engaging the Draveri ship. Miller stared at the alien device, his vision blurring from blood loss and pain. He had 1 arm, fading strength, and no knowledge of Draveri explosives. But he wasn't about to give up. Miller stared at the bomb, his mind racing despite his weakened state. 3 minutes and 40 seconds remained on the alien timer. "Tivac, what do you know about Draveri explosives?" Miller asked. The Excelarian moved closer, keeping his weapon trained on the door. "Very little. Their technology is secretive." Miller examined the device without touching it. A central control unit connected to multiple charges placed strategically around the reactor core. "Garcia, Jones, right. What's your location?" Miller called into his comm. "Level 2, Section C," Garcia responded. "We've got 4 wounded Xilarians. Moving slow." "Get them to the evacuation point," Miller ordered. "That's an order." "What about you?" Wright asked. "We're handling the bomb," Miller said, not mentioning that he had no idea how to disarm it. Tivac was watching Miller closely. "You have a plan." Miller didn't answer directly. Instead, he studied the reactor controls. "If we can't stop the bomb, maybe we can contain the blast." Understanding dawned in Tivac's compound eyes. "The emergency containment shields." "Exactly," Miller said. "If we activate them around the reactor core, the explosion might be contained." "Might," Tivac emphasized. "The odds are better than nothing," Miller cut him off. He had no interest in hearing the exact percentage of their likely failure. Miller moved to the control panel, his remaining hand hovering over the unfamiliar system. "Talk me through this." Tivac explained the control sequence for the emergency shields. It was complex, requiring multiple confirmations and security clearances. "Coalition override codes incoming," Captain Davis said over the comm. "Should give you full access." The codes appeared on Miller's wrist display. He began entering them with his shaking hand, fighting to stay focused as his strength ebbed. "How much time?" Miller asked, not taking his eyes off the control panel. 2 minutes, 12 seconds, Tivac replied, his voice tense. Miller's fingers slipped on the controls. He cursed, then tried again. The shield activation sequence was nearly complete when gunfire erupted outside the door. "More Draveri," Tivac warned, returning fire through the doorway. Miller couldn't spare a glance. "Hold them off. I need 30 more seconds." The gunfight intensified. Tivac took cover behind a console, firing precisely at the Draveri in the corridor. One shot got through, hitting the wall near Miller's head. He didn't flinch, totally focused on the controls. "Shields at 60% charge," the station computer announced. "Containment not yet sufficient for explosive force. Override safety protocols," Miller ordered. "Emergency authorization Miller 7 Delta." "Safety protocols disengaged," the computer responded. "Warning. Radiation leakage possible. Miller nodded grimly. Better than the alternative. 1 minute remained on the bomb's timer. The shield was at 80%, still not enough to fully contain the blast. Tuvok took a hit to his exoskeleton, the impact throwing him across the room. He recovered quickly, the tough carapace having absorbed most of the damage. Miller, you must evacuate now, Tuvok insisted. The shield will not reach full strength in time. Miller shook his head. Not leaving until this is done. Through the doorway, Miller could see more Draveri approaching. The reinforcements hadn't managed to eliminate all of them yet. 30 seconds to detonation, Tuvok warned. Miller made a decision. Tuvok, go. Get to the evacuation point. The Accelerian's mandibles clicked in protest. I will not leave. That's an order, Miller snapped. Someone needs to report what happened here. Tuvok hesitated, his alien features unreadable to human eyes. Then, to Miller's surprise, he moved to stand beside him at the control panel. My species values precise planning and risk avoidance, Tuvok said. But today I have learned something from humans. Sometimes one must simply do what is necessary. Miller felt a surge of respect for the alien. Shields at 90%. It might be enough if we redirect power from life support. Together, they worked the controls, fingers flying over the panel as the timer counted down. The Draveri at the door were getting closer. The bomb's timer showed 15 seconds. Shield containment at 95%, the computer announced. Not enough, Miller said through gritted teeth. It will have to be, Tuvok replied. The comm crackled with Captain Davis's voice. Miller, Tuvok, emergency transport lock established. Stand by for extraction. A sensation like static electricity filled the air around them. Miller looked at Tuvok with surprise. They can't beam us out through the shields. They must have. Tuvok began. The room dissolved around them as the transport took effect. The last thing Miller saw was the bomb's timer reaching 3 seconds. Miller opened his eyes to bright lights and the sterile smell of a medical bay. For a moment, he thought he was back on Earth. Then he saw the high ceiling designed for Accelerian height, and reality returned. He's awake, a human voice said. Right, the medic. Miller tried to sit up but felt strangely off balance. He looked down at his left arm and saw nothing below the elbow, just a neatly bandaged stump. Easy, Sergeant, Captain Davis said, stepping into view. You've been through a lot. Miller's throat felt dry. The station. Tuvok. The station survived, mostly, Davis said. Your containment shields held just enough to prevent a complete destruction. As for Tuvok, he's fine. Better than you, actually. As if summoned by his name, the Accelerian appeared at the doorway. His blue-tinged exoskeleton had been polished, and a new insignia marked his shoulder guard. Staff Sergeant Miller, Tuvok said formally. It is good to see you conscious. Miller attempted a smile. Good to be conscious. How long was I out? 32 hours, Wright answered. You lost a lot of blood. We had to perform emergency surgery to properly close your arm. Miller nodded, looking again at where his arm used to be. Strange, but he could still feel it sometimes, a phantom limb. The doctors back on Earth would call it. The rest of the team? Miller asked. All alive, Davis said. Garcia has some burns. Jones took a shot to the leg. All the Accelerians survived too. You two took the worst of it. Tuvok moved closer to Miller's bed. The Coalition High Command has sent a formal commendation for our actions. They are calling it an unprecedented example of interspecies cooperation. Miller tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough. All it took was nearly dying together. The captain excused himself, taking Wright with him to give them privacy. When they were alone, Tuvok's formal manner relaxed slightly. I have watched the medical recordings, Tuvok said, of your treatment after the injury. I have shared them with my superiors. Miller raised an eyebrow. Didn't know I was a training video. You are more than that, Tuvok said seriously. You have changed how the Xilarian military views humans. Before, they called you Deathworlders with a mix of fear and dismissal. Now they use the term with respect. Miller shifted uncomfortably. He had never been good with praise. I just did what anyone would do. No, Tivak insisted. What you did, continuing to fight, to think tactically, to lead after such an injury, it is not what anyone would do. It is not what a Xilarian would do, or a Dravari, or any other species we know. Tivak reached into a compartment in his exoskeleton and pulled out a small object, a band of shimmering metal with blue stones embedded in it. This is Xartan, Tivak explained, a warrior's band. In our history, it is given to those who show exceptional courage and resilience. No non-Xilarian has ever received one, until now. Tivak placed the band on Miller's right wrist. It felt cool and surprisingly light. I don't know what to say, Miller admitted. You have already said everything necessary through your actions, Tivak replied. But there is something else. Tivak produced a data pad showing schematics of what looked like an advanced prosthetic arm. Our engineers have been studying human prosthetic technology. Combined with Xilarian materials science, we believe we can create something better than either of our species has developed alone. Miller examined the design with interest. The arm looked sleeker than Earth models, with capabilities he'd never seen before. Joint project? Miller asked. The first of many, Tivak confirmed. Commander Krizat has proposed a new training program. Xilarian tactical precision combined with human adaptability. And he paused, searching for the right word. Stubbornness. Miller smiled. I prefer to call it determination. Tivak's mandibles clicked in what Miller now recognized as a Xilarian smile. The Coalition has approved the program. They are calling it the Deathworlder Initiative. You are requested as its first instructor, once you have recovered. Miller looked at his missing arm, then at the warrior's band on his wrist, and finally at Tivak. He had joined the Marines to serve his country. Now he would serve his entire species, teaching aliens what humans had learned through countless generations on their harsh, beautiful world, how to endure, how to adapt, and how to carry on. When do we start? Miller asked.